convicted of horrific crimes. 3. The Pied Piper, a tale of mass disappearance. The Pied Piper of Hamelin was not just about a man who played music to lead away rats. He also took the children. In some versions, the town refuses to pay him for his services, so he takes revenge by luring all of their children into a cave, where they are never seen again. Historians believe this could be based on a real event, where an entire group of children from Hamelin mysteriously vanished in the Middle Ages. 4. Rumpelstiltskin, a vengeful trickster. In the original versions of Rumpelstiltskin, when the young queen guesses his name, he doesn't just leave. He flies into a rage so intense that he tears himself in half. In some versions, he stomps on the ground in fury, falling into a pit and disappearing forever. His obsession with taking the queen's child has led some to believe he wasn't just a trickster, but something far darker. 5. The Robber Bridegroom, a wedding night nightmare. This lesser-known grim tale tells the story of a young woman forced to marry a wealthy man. Suspicious of her husband-to-be, she follows him to his home, only to discover that he and his band of robbers murder and eat women. She watches in horror as they butcher a young girl, cutting her into pieces. Luckily, she escapes and exposes them, leading to their execution. 6. The Juniper Tree, a tale of cannibalism and revenge. One of the most horrifying grim fairy tales, The Juniper Tree tells of a stepmother who decapitates her stepson, cooks his body, and feeds it to his unsuspecting father. The boy's sister buries his bones under a juniper tree, and from the tree the boy returns as a vengeful spirit, transforming into a bird and dropping a millstone on his stepmother, crushing her to death. 7. The Girl Without Hands, a story of betrayal and survival. In this disturbing fairy tale, a poor man accidentally sells his daughter to the devil in exchange for wealth. When she resists the devil's temptations, her own father chops off her hands to fulfill the bargain. Eventually, she escapes, gains magical silver hands, and finds a happier fate, but not before enduring unimaginable suffering. Why were these stories so disturbing? Fairy tales weren't just for children. They were warnings, morality lessons, and sometimes outright horror stories meant to instill fear and obedience. Over time, many of them were altered, softened, or rewritten to make them more acceptable. Which of these dark fairy tales shocked you the most? Want to uncover more forgotten stories and chilling legends? Subscribe now and dive into the forgotten history of fairy tales. Imagine having a wish so powerful that everything you touch turns to gold. Sounds like a dream, right? But for King Midas, this dream turned into a nightmare. Let's dive into his tragic story. Once upon a time, King Midas ruled over a prosperous kingdom known for his wealth and opulence. But Midas wasn't just content with riches. He wanted more. He wished for the ability to turn anything he touched into gold. One day, the god Dionysus appeared before him and, impressed by Midas's devotion, granted him the wish. At first, Midas was overjoyed. Everything he touched, his food, his treasures, his furniture, transformed into gold. His wealth grew beyond imagination, and his joy knew no bounds. But soon, Midas realized the curse of his wish. He touched a rose, gold. He touched his food, gold. Desperate for a meal, he tried to drink water, gold. In horror, Midas realized that even his daughter, whom he loved dearly, turned into a lifeless golden statue when he touched her. Furious with the consequences of his greed, Midas begged Dionysus for mercy. The god, seeing the king's suffering, told him to wash in the river Pactolus. And in that moment, Midas's golden touch was taken away. The river's waters, now imbued with Midas's curse, carried gold downstream, forever tainting the land. King Midas's story is a reminder that greed often blinds us to the consequences of our desires. His once prized gift became his greatest curse, teaching us that not all treasures are worth the price. If King Midas's tale of power and greed left you thinking, make sure to subscribe for more epic Greek myths and their timeless lessons. Stay tuned for more stories of fate, love, and the god's wrath. Hor, the thunder god, woke up to find his greatest nightmare had come true. Mjolnir, his mighty hammer that could level mountains and control lightning itself, was gone. Without it, the thunder god was powerless, vulnerable, and mocked. The weapon that defined his very identity as protector of Asgard had vanished without a trace. But what happened next would humiliate him more than any defeat in battle. To get his hammer back, Thor would have to do something that went against every fiber of his warrior identity. You won't believe the disguise he ends up in. It all began on what should have been an ordinary morning in Asgard. Picture Thor reaching for the leather grip that had been at his side for countless centuries, his fingers closing around nothing but empty air. The spot where Mjolnir should rest felt cold and wrong, like a missing tooth that your tongue keeps finding. Thor's morning routine, as predictable as sunrise over Asgard's golden halls, shattered in that single moment of realization. The hammer forged by dwarven masters, the weapon that could summon lightning and level mountains, had vanished without so much as a whisper of sound. The initial shock hit Thor like a physical blow. His hand remained suspended in space, still reaching for what wasn't there. Then panic crept in, cold and relentless. He let out a blood-curdling roar of sheer rage, the whole palace trembling. Without Mjolnir, he was powerless, vulnerable, and mocked, stripped of the weapon that made him Asgard's primary defender. The enemies that prowled the borders of the Nine Realms knew about his mighty hammer. They counted on Thor's strength to keep them at bay. Now that strength was gone. Word spread through Asgard's halls faster than wildfire. The other gods gathered in emergency council, their faces grave as they grasped the full scope of the crisis. Odin's ravens had brought no news. The watchmen at the gates had seen nothing. Mjolnir had simply disappeared, as if it had never existed at all. The assembled gods understood what Thor's loss meant for their realm. Asgard stood vulnerable, its greatest protector reduced to a shadow of his former self. Loki stepped forward through the crowd of worried gods, his familiar, cunning smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He offered to investigate the theft using his shape-shifting abilities, volunteering to venture where other gods could not go undetected. The council accepted his proposal immediately, desperate for any lead in their search. Thor watched his brother prepare for the mission, knowing that Loki's success or failure would determine his own fate. Loki first borrowed Freya's magic feathered coat, allowing him to fly in falcon form to Jotunheim without raising alarms. Each dead end pushed Thor deeper into desperation. He imagined facing his enemies defenseless, their laughter echoing as they realized the thunder god carried no thunder. The trail finally led to the most dangerous territory of all, Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. Loki strode into the council chamber with the confident gait of someone who had solved a mystery, but his expression carried an ominous weight. The giant Thrym, lord of the frost giants, had openly boasted about his theft from his massive throne of ice and stone. He had buried Mjolnir 8 leagues beneath the frozen earth of his realm, thrice deeper than any giant's hall, he claimed, placing it where even Thor's strength would be useless. Thrym had what he thought was a simple demand for the Norse gods. He wanted the beautiful goddess Freya as his bride in exchange for the hammer's return. The giant had fixated on her legendary beauty and grace, convinced that possessing both Mjolnir and the goddess of love would make him the most powerful being in all the 9 realms. His arrogance knew no bounds as he described his elaborate wedding plans to Loki, speaking of golden halls and feasts that would last for weeks. Thrym believed the gods had no choice but to accept his terms. When Loki spoke to the council about Thrym's demand, the council fell silent. Freya's reaction shattered the tense quiet that followed Loki's report, causing her rage to break the Brysinger necklace, its gems scattering across the floor in glittering fragments. She declared she would rather throw herself into the deepest ocean than marry the frost giant who dared make such a demand. The gods found themselves trapped in an impossible situation. They could sacrifice one of their most beloved goddesses to a giant's lust, or they could leave Thor permanently weakened and Asgard vulnerable to every enemy that prowled the borders. The council erupted in frantic debate. Some suggested launching a full assault on Jotunheim, but Thrym's fortress was impregnable and his army vast. Others proposed trickery or negotiation, but every path led to either devastating war or humiliating surrender. Heimdall, the far-seeing guardian who watched over the Rainbow Bridge, had remained silent throughout the heated discussions. When he finally spoke, his words stopped every conversation in the hall. His suggestion was so outrageous, so completely unthinkable, that even Loki's jaw dropped open in shock. The gods stared at Heimdall as if he had lost his mind, but they were out of other options. What he proposed, however, would challenge everything Thor stood for as a warrior. Heimdall's words hung in the air like a challenge to the very foundations of Norse honor. The far-seeing god had suggested that Thor disguise himself as a bride and infiltrate Thrym's wedding feast to recover Mjolnir. He spoke with calm authority, tie housewife's keys about his waist, and pin bridal jewels upon his breast. The idea was so fundamentally opposed to Norse concepts of masculine honor that Thor's initial response shook the very walls of Asgard. He declared the plan preposterous and swore he would never hear the end of it if word spread that the Thunder God had dressed as a woman. The assembled gods watched in tense silence as their mightiest protector wrestled with a challenge that could not be solved through brute force or lightning strikes. They had already considered launching a full assault on Jotunheim, but Thrym's fortress was impregnable and his army vast. No other choice remained. Thor paced the hall like a caged wolf, his massive fists clenched as he grappled with the impossible choice between his warrior's pride and his duty to protect Asgard. Every instinct in his body rebelled against the idea of abandoning his identity as a fearsome warrior to play the role of a delicate bride. Loki stepped forward with barely contained excitement, volunteering to accompany Thor as his maidservant. The trickster god's eagerness to participate in this elaborate deception revealed his true nature. While Thor struggled with the concept, Loki was already plotting the specifics of costumes, mannerisms, and the lies they would need to maintain throughout their dangerous mission. The transformation began with layers of bridal linen draped over Thor's massive frame. Servants brought forth delicate jewelry, housewife's keys that symbolized domestic authority, and a dainty hood for his head. Finally came the precious necklace of Brisingr. Each item added to the disguise felt like another blow to Thor's warrior identity. When he finally looked at his reflection, the god of thunder saw an unconvincing bride staring back at him. Thor finally accepted the plan because no alternative existed. The unlikely pair prepared to set off for enemy territory, where their deception would face its ultimate test among giants, eager to celebrate their lord's triumph. The great hall of Thrym's fortress buzzed with excitement as giants gathered to witness their lord's marriage to the most beautiful goddess in all the 9 realms. Thor sat at the high table in his bridal disguise, surrounded by massive frost giants who raised their drinking horns in celebration. The feast spread before them displayed the giants' wealth and power. Roasted oxen filled enormous platters, fresh salmon gleamed on silver dishes, and barrels of mead stood ready to fuel the night's festivities. Thor's legendary appetite struck like a thunderbolt. He polished off an ox and ate whole salmon in moments, tearing through the meat as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. 3 measures of mead vanished as quickly as if someone had poured them into a bottomless pit. The assembled giants watched in stunned silence as the delicate bride consumed more food than most warriors could handle. Thrym's eyes narrowed with growing suspicion. This goddess ate like a battle-hardened warrior, returning from a long campaign, not like the refined Freya he expected to marry. Loki stepped forward with the smooth confidence of a master storyteller. He spun a tale about Freya's 8-day fast in eager anticipation of reaching Jotunheim and marrying the mighty Thrym. The explanation painted a picture of a lovesick goddess, so excited about her wedding that she had refused all food during her journey. The giants nodded in understanding, their suspicions melting away as they accepted this romantic explanation. Thrym felt honored by such devotion and relaxed completely, his doubts vanishing. Beneath his bridal veil, Thor's rage simmered like molten metal ready to explode.